G'day watchers, welcome back to the channel. Today I am featuring another piece from Glycine. So this particular piece is another piece that I've borrowed from my mate and local supporter Graham. So shout out again to Graham for lending me yet another one of his watches. So without further ado, let's just get into this box. So there's an outer cardboard box. You've seen me review Glycine before, so you're probably somewhat familiar with some of these boxes, especially if you follow Horology brands, and this certainly is a pretty well-known brand. So the inner box is kind of like a faux covering over, I think firm card is what it is. So that's how it looks like on the inside. There's just a simple tag there, and let's just get this watch out of the cushion and put this aside. Before I show you the watch itself, I just want to show you the paperwork, which is a little bit large to squeeze in that box, but that's what you have to do to squeeze it in. Warranty card there, and just a very elegant and simple manual, I have to say. They really just give you this, nothing superfluous, just the basic instructions to tell you how to work all the features of this watch, which is not super complicated, but there are a number of parts to it. So let's just open this up and show you the watch proper. So guys, this is the Glycine Airman 42 double 12 model. This model number is GL0063. All links to products below, of course, that I can find. As far as I can tell, the original MSRP of this particular watch is $1625, so it's 1,625 USD, which seems actually quite high. Realistically, it seems that people usually got this for under 600 USD. eBay, if you look right now, that's around the going price, just under 600 USD. The Joma shop listing actually listed for 300, which is, I think would be an absolute bargain if you could pick this Swiss-made watch for 300 USD. That would be amazing, I think. Okay, so that's the pricing of this particular watch. So let's just get into the movement here. So the movement in this particular watch is actually called the Glycine GL224, which really is a modification of an ETA 2824-2, a very light modification. And I'll put the stats on the left for you to see there. So all the typical stats that you expect or are familiar with of the ETA 2824. It does have a quick set date. In this case, the date is implemented at a 3 o'clock window at that cutout that you can see there. So black writing on white disc. Does have manual winding. Rated accuracy, as you can see on the left. In actual use, this is behaving as plus 13 seconds per day. So within the typical rated expectations of a base ETA 2824 movement, I think. Okay, so case-wise, let's look at the finishing now and let you look at it as I pan it around and let the light play on it. So the bezel on top actually has circular brushing on the top surface of the bezel, right? And then you get this grip pattern that allows you to grip the bezel and turn it. Now the case itself, the top surface of the lugs, you can see there are longitudinal brushing, and then it transitions to polished surfaces for everything else. So the rest of the case is actually finished in a high polish. That's really what you have here. Now the case back, let's let you, I'm just going to rest the camera on the case back now and let you see the escapement beating away. So this particular case back is a screw down display case back, all right? Obviously, that's what some other Glycine watches have done, and you can see that decorated rotor. This is a basic modification of the rotor there with the screw-in crown, and it does have a cross-hatching pattern, which is a vintage callback, a really nice vintage callback, I must say, that they've gone there. The overall water rating of this watch is 100 meters. That's what they've gone for. All right, this crown is not a crown that affects the integrity of the case. It's actually outside of the case, so that particular one doesn't affect the water rating there. But we'll get into that particular crown function as we move into the bezel. So now looking at the dial, guys, all right, that you rest your eyes on that dial there. So this dial is a matte black. It's a matte black dial with all printed details, printed brand name, automatic wheel timer down the bottom, chapter ring around the outside, as well as 1 to 12 markers. Alright, that's really what we have here. It does have polished steel syringe style hands. The second hand, alright, the syringe style is for the minute and hour hand. The second hand is more a simple stick with a counterbalance and a kind of a polygonal bit there for the loom painted onto the second hand there. Right, the loom here is painted onto the dial as well as onto all the hands here, and it is a superluminova of some description. Presumably it's either C1 or C3, but they haven't actually stated. And of course I'll put a loom shot right here for you guys to see how it glows in the dark. Okay, so that's really the dial details I want to tell you here. So now getting into the bezel. The bezel is possibly the most interesting part of this watch, and really is part of the original Airman 24-hour watch series. So the bezel is a 12-hour mark bezel. In fact, I've actually offset it to 11 there. So just turn it back to 12 and then use that crown to lock it in. That's really what that crown does. All right, a 12-hour bezel, there's no insert here. It's a solid steel bezel. And this fastening system at 4 o'clock is exactly how it was when this watch was first designed in the 1950s. They kept this kind of fastening and locking system at 4 o'clock the same as it was, as far as I can tell from pictures. Now, in terms of the degrees of lock, if you open it up, you can see there's certain positions that it locks in, and it actually counts as 12 positions per 30 degrees or per hour. There's 12 positions. Now that's a little bit unorthodox, right? 12 doesn't divide into the 5 minutes, but 12 does divide into the time zones that you want. So with the 12 positions per hour or per time zone hour, that actually allows you to adjust this bezel to all known time zones in the world. So the most odd time zones, for example, Nepal, you do have to have a 45 or 15-minute increment compared to GMT. Most other time zones are either going to be half hour or 1 hour, and that would serve your needs for, I think 99% of the time. But if you're in one of those odd time zones with 15-minute increment, you can actually still use this bezel to set the time zone, set the hour to point to the time zone appropriately. So that's really the function of this 12-hour bezel. It's kind of like a GMT bezel, but not really. It's more like a 12-hour timing bezel to allow you to kind of adjust to the time zone that you're in. All right, enough about the bezel and the fastening system. That's really the main feature of this watch, I think. Above the dial is a domed sapphire crystal with internal anti-reflective coating, as you may expect. I realize I haven't mentioned the case dimensions, so let's just cover that for you now. The case is actually 42 millimeters in diameter. So you can see that there's a little bit of a roundness here. So if you measure the outer edge of that roundness, it's actually 42 millimeters. If you measure the bezel, it actually comes out to be 41 millimeters. So the bezel is slightly smaller diameter than the case. Thickness here is quite a pleasing 12.5 millimeters, so not very thick at all, very pleasant on the wrist. 22 millimeter lug width for this watch, which is appropriate, I think, and a lug-to-lug distance, which is kind of large. 52.5 millimeters is what is coming out there between my thumbs, so a large lug-to-lug distance. Overall weight with this leather band is only 96 grams, so pleasingly light on the wrist. All right, going on to the band then. So this is just stitched calf leather, right, with the Glycine name on the bottom there. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. It's just a stitched leather with a brushed steel buckle there. All right, this basic one, probably better leather than most or all the Chinese brands that I've seen, but it is still a leather strap that won't last many, many years. In fact, you're already seeing creasing there. So let's just try it on for the wrist shot now. And there we have the Glycine Airman 42 on my 17 centimeter wrist. Very pleasing, actually. In fact, the way this watch sits, it does wear smaller than its advertised size, despite the large lugs. So it kind of get away with it, I think. This lugs are, I think, on the larger side, probably a little bit too large for me, just because of those lugs. But that dial with that case wears pleasingly smaller than you think it might. Okay, so that's how it looks like on the wrist there. Now, one thing I'll mention about this lug-to-lug distance and the lug design that curves down under the case back is that this makes it a bit of a strap monster, and it lends itself to taking the strap out and trying out various other straps. So let me just show a couple of others to you now. And here it is on this Blue Shark Alpha Shark NATO, still one of my favorite straps, you know, possibly the best quality NATO that I have in my possession at the moment. I haven't tucked that in too much, but that's how it would look. And, you know, seeing how it really does suit different straps. Just showing you how it rides on the NATO here. If I take it out, you can see, right, that's you know, because of those lugs, it kind of curves down onto the NATO, so it doesn't ride as high as other watches may. So there we go, on this Alpha Shark NATO here. Let me show you another strap now. And here it is on a perforated silicon rubber strap. But in this case, hopefully you can see that this is courtesy of Vario straps from Singapore. I'll just take it off to show it to you a little bit more. So quality perforated silicon rubber. Time will tell how long this lasts, but you know what it does have is colored stitching in various colors that you can choose in various strap widths as well. This is what they have put out recently. So courtesy of Ivan from Vario Straps, and yes, it's Ivan, Southeast Asian by the name of Ivan. What a coincidence, who owns and runs Vario. So there we have it. What a small world. Okay, so I'm just going to take this off and put it back to the original for the final thoughts. Alright guys, here it is back on the original leather. Now, what do I like about this watch? What I have enjoyed about this over the week or so that I've worn it? Well, I really like it for the fact that it's a very modern revision of an absolute classic, right? The Glycine Airman, the first Airman, 1950s, was a 24-hour watch, 24-hour central hand, you know, indicating kind of like a time that pilots can use. And it had these original features, you know, the locking mechanism, the bezel that turned to allow you to set a second time zone or a third time zone with a GMT had. You know, it's all the original cues, very, very similar looks, except in a much larger size at 42. I think the original was actually more like 36, much smaller than today's preferences. But, you know, for what it is, I like the modern update. A lot of kind of vintage cues, yet the modern benefits of superluminova, you know, a Swiss Eto movement, which is very well known for a great track record, very reliable, and, you know, regulated to reasonable accuracy. Those are the things I like about this. It's got a very clear, high contrast style in a quality case with really quite great finishing. I really like the finishing, you know, another vintage cue there, the hatch crown, the bezel, the way the polishing has been done to contrast with the brushing on the bezel polished sides. Really, it stands out on the wrist. There's something about this finishing combination that really makes it quite attractive on the wrist. That's something I really noted when I've tried this on. You know, it's got that point of interest conversations piece of that 4 o'clock crown. You know, people will look at that if they're interested in watches and wonder, oh, what does that do? What function is that? And you can start a conversation. And, you know, again, I've said that it wears smaller than its size. Thanks to the dial design, largely, I think, you know, it's got that bezel that brings in the dial. And then if you look at where the position of the indices are, right, that's really where it would be on a smaller watch without that 1 to 12 marking on the outside. And I think that's part of why this kind of wears smaller. And that's a good thing, I think, for at least for me, with my 17 centimeter wrist, that's been actually a good thing. Now, the negatives, the things I would bring up to note, again, that lug-to-lug distance, that is large. It makes it a little bit awkward on the wrist. It's probably technically too large for me, and therefore it would make it a little bit awkward for, you know, quite a lot of people to wear a 52.5 millimeter lug-to-lug distance watch. But because of that design, it also makes it very amenable to swapping out to NATOs and what have you. So it's a bit of a give and take, I think. You know, and that's really all I have to pick about this watch. There's a lot to like, I think. You know, one thing I would mention, you know, Glycine being owned by Invicta now, that's something that's been rued by many. You know, is that a Glycine Victor logo? People have said that that's probably something that's changed before the change in ownership, but who knows whether there was some influence towards the change in that logo. I can't find anything official from Glycine itself, so let me know if you know. But despite the fact that it has been taken over, I think a lot of the designs do appear to remain independent, remained archetypally and quintessentially Glycine. I don't feel that they've really stepped in and ruined the company. At least that's from what I've seen on their models coming out. But let me know if you have different thoughts about Glycine and their current models. So guys, there we have it. My review of the Glycine Airman 42, a very nice modern update of a vintage classic, I think. Let me know what you think. Guys, if you enjoy my videos, do consider subscribing. I put out new content every week, always aiming to be objective and unbiased about all things horology. Thank you again for sticking with me, and as always, I'll catch you guys next time.